Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lost Bits. I am Marie. It's so lovely to see you. Lost Bits is the place where I share cool bits of information and research that I find while making the main episodes here on my channel. Until now, I've been kind of doing these Lost Bits episodes sporadically, but I want to get more regular about it, and I love sitting down with you guys like this. So from now on, every Saturday is going to be our Lost Bit today. I know. It's been a little bit since our last one. We've met the Chinchorro, we hung out in Bergheim and saw some really creepy bones, and most recently we met the screaming mummy of Deir al-Bahari. I came across so much different, interesting just stuff when making those episodes. So I'm so excited to dive in. I did want to say before we start today, guys, we just hit 100 subscribers. I'm so grateful. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here. And I know things have been changing a little bit around the channel, like doing different style thumbnails and other things like that, like the format of how I do these episodes. I hope you guys know the content is never changing. I'm just still very new at this. I've only been doing it a couple months. And so I sort of feel like I'm going through my growing pains phase, if that makes sense. I'm just still figuring out how I like things to look and how I like to deliver these stories to you all. And I really appreciate your patience. Anyway, that's enough about all that. Let's just dive in. Oh, the Chinchorro. I love the Chinchorro. I love the mummies. I love the people. I love the history. So much history. One thing I wanted to talk about that I mentioned at the end of that episode is that the mummies have been sort of facing some challenges lately due to environmental factors, as well as some things like looting, but it's mostly environmental. The moisture down in the Atacama has been rising a lot in the last few years, and so they've literally been described as the mummies like melting. And as you can see from some of these pictures, they're not in great shape. And I didn't really explain it that deeply in the episode, partly because I didn't want to be a downer, but mostly because I am actually hopeful that this could get better in the future. Like, they did just get their UNESCO status down there. And Chile has just made a bunch of changes recently to some of its government policies relating to this stuff. So hopefully, these beautiful mummies can get the preservation and conservation that they need. And there's so many dedicated volunteers, especially among the locals in that area, that are working so hard to protect these mummies and this huge part of our human heritage. And as always, my sources can be found pinned to the top comment below, and I do have a couple links on this there. So if you're interested in all this, then be sure to check that out. Also, this is kind of just a side thing about the Chinchorro, but I used a couple pictures of this, okay? I wanted to make it clear, this is not something the Chinchorro built themselves. This is a beautiful, beautiful monument that actually is placed in a couple different locations and comprised of a couple different statues. But as you can see, they've been designed to look like the Chinchorro mummies, and they're just gorgeous. So in those sources below, I'm going to put a link to a little bit of information on those monuments because they're just breathtaking. Oh, yeah, let's jump to the Bergheim bone pit. So the Bergheim bone pit, I don't have any information that makes it less mysterious, unfortunately. I did want to talk a little bit, though, about some stuff for context. I didn't want to make it sound in the episode like I'm going like, oh, these violent cavemen, you know, like, oh, so barbaric. When actually, one of the reasons that Bergheim stands out so much is not just the mysterious hand layer, though that is a lot, but also just how rare it is to see violence like this from that period. Now, I do have an episode planned in the future on another extreme example of Neolithic violence. But I really hope that it never comes across as the Neolithic is just this horrible place where people were killing each other. There's also so many beautiful Neolithic graves and burial mounds and just beautiful structures that they built. And we're going to be looking at some more of those in the future too. Also, I should say, regardless of the reason why they were cutting off these hands and arms and everything else, even if it was for the worst possible reason, obviously they're not the only people in human history to mutilate their enemies, as awful as that sounds. One really dark hole of research I fell into when making this episode was looking up the history of headhunting. Including some very unfortunate and very disturbing recent examples that I'm showing you some images of here. And yeah, this is truly, like I said, a dark hole of research. I did not enjoy reading about all of this. I might do an episode, if any of you are interested in the future, on the history of practices like this. But basically, all over the world, throughout human history, there's always been people. And one very common example is heads or hands. So I think, as shocking as the Bergheim bone pit is and should be, it's not an anomaly necessarily in the larger human picture. Very, very unfortunately. Woo, the screaming mummy! We met the screaming mummy. Well, okay, so the first bit of information I have for you is that is not even the only screaming mummy found at Deir el-Bahari. And actually, this other screaming mummy, a different screaming mummy, has been in the news a lot lately and has its own fascinating backstory, at least from what we know of it, which is actually still very little. I will put some good links to this below, and we may have to visit Deir el-Bahari again in the future. But just to give you a quick version of this mummy's backstory as we know it, this new screaming mummy is the mummy of a woman. We don't know her exact identity, but she seems to have been a close relation of an official of Queen Hatshepsut, known as Senenmut. Now, unlike our screaming mummy, she was actually embalmed properly, except that her organs were left, but that seems to be because, and this is why also she was caught with that horrible expression on her face, is she seemed to have died in agony and her muscles seized up and her face seized up, so they might not have been able to remove her organs. She was around 48 years of age when she died, and that's mostly what we know, though there is some more specific detail in the articles I'll put below. And hopefully we can find out more about her past soon. And that brings me nicely actually to the last bit of info I wanted to bring up, both about the screaming mummy and just for today's episode, is that there's lots of mummies from our past, actually, not just from Egypt, that look like they're screaming when they probably didn't die in agony. As the body relaxes after death, the jaw muscles will also relax and cause the jaw to just hang down and make a body look like they're screaming if that jaw isn't held up, which is something embalmers throughout the world, including ancient Egypt, were aware of and would usually literally strap the chin up to keep that from happening. Like I said, her muscles must have been very frozen for them not to be able to do that. But that's it for today's Lost Bits. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here. I am excited to tell you too, this week I have an episode planned on a really exciting, mysterious place in Mexico, but I don't want to give it away. I hope I'll see you there, but until then, be safe, be happy, go with all my love. Until next time, goodbye.